One day during Chen Shui-bian's second term as Taiwan's president, several people lugged what a witness described as 5 or 6 fruit boxes into the presidential residence in Taipei. Inside the crates, the witness later said, was 200 million in new Taiwan dollars, equal to about $6 million in US currency. The cash was a bribe intended for First Lady Wu Shuzhen, a sweetener encouraging her to prod her husband to provide regulatory relief to a securities firm involved in a contested merger, according to court claims by US and Taiwanese authorities. Pulling strings in such situations, the witness said, required getting consent from Madam.
Documents in U.S. District Court in Manhattan describe the circuitous path that authorities believe the cash followed after it was unpacked from the fruit boxes. First, it was stored in a bank vault in Taipei along with other piles of loose cash that the First Lady described as political donations. Later, much of the cash in the vault was stuffed into 7 suitcases and stored in a basement at the home of an executive involved in the corporate merger. After a time, it was moved, in a roundabout way, through banks in Hong Kong and the US and into a Swiss account controlled by the first couple's son. In the spring of 2008, a chunk of that money was wired into an account in Miami. US authorities claimed that on May 29, 2008, 9 days after Chen had completed his second and final term as Taiwan's president, money from the Miami account was used to buy a prime piece of a real estate in yet another destination in the money's global odyssey. The property, a $1.575 million apartment in Manhattan's Onyx Chelsea, a glass and metal tower steps away, as real estate promoters say, from Chelsea Park and Madison Square Garden. The movement of dirty money from fruit boxes in Taipei into America's real estate capital illustrates, in vivid detail, one of New York's dirty secrets. High-end New York real estate is an alluring destination for corrupt politicians, tax dodgers and money launderers around the globe. New York is among an elite group of destinations, along with Miami, London, Dubai and a few other cities around the world, that attract large numbers of international property buyers. Manhattan condos are popular with wealthy Chinese, Russians, and South Americans. Since 2008, roughly 30% of condo sales in pricey Manhattan developments have been to buyers who listed an international address or bought in the name of a limited liability company or some other corporate entity, a maneuver often employed by foreign purchasers. Because many buyers go to great lengths to hide their interests in New York properties, it's impossible to put a number on what proportion of buyers from overseas are laundering ill-gotten gains. Many act in an above-board manner and use tax loopholes that are legal in their home countries. But it's clear that New York's public officials and its real estate industry embrace the wealthy and powerful without much thought to where their money comes from. During his time in office, former Mayor Michael Bloomberg was a cheerleader for encouraging the mega-wealthy to relocate to the city. "Wouldn't it be great if we could get all the Russian billionaires to move here?" he told New York Magazine in September. "Combine that give us your rich ethos with state and local policies that lavish tax breaks on Manhattan's wealthiest homeowners and federal policies that allow real estate agents to close their eyes to whether their clients are trafficking in illicit money, and the results are predictable. New York is a magnet for the super-rich homebuyers from other lands bearing money of sometimes dubious provenance. The flood of foreign capital pouring into New York properties makes it easy for suspect figures to hide their fortunes amid Manhattan's residential gold rush," according to interviews with money laundering experts and court documents and secret offshore records reviewed by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Jaikumar Ramaswamy, chief of the U.S. Justice Department's Anti-Money Laundering Section, says oligarchs and despots like to put their money into high-end real estate for a number of reasons. They need an escape option if things take a turn for them in their home countries, they want to park their assets in an investment that's known to preserve value, and they want to be able to enjoy and flaunt their wealth. They're not buying real estate in Detroit, he says. They're buying in places that give them some sort of status: London, Paris, New York, Malibu. Many walk a fine line between showing off and staying on the down low. Instead of putting property in their own names, they may arrange to put the names of their spouses, children, lawyers or other proxies on property deeds. Often, the buyer of record isn't even a flesh and blood person, it's an anonymous limited liability company set up in a U.S. state, or an offshore company established in the British Virgin Islands or some other overseas haven. The story of the Manhattan apartment purchased by Taiwan's former first family illustrates how offshore structures are used to steer ill-gotten gains into real estate. Along with passing through a tangle of bank accounts, the bribe money's origins and the identities of the people associated with it were obscured by the use of offshore entities, including a trust registered on the island of Nevis and shell companies in the British Virgin Islands. As a final step, a Miami-based wealth advisor, a German national named Stefan Arsus, set up a New York company, West 28th Street LLC, that stood in as the Chelsea condo's owner of record. Any check of the LLC's ownership would have traced back to one of the British Virgin Islands companies and hit a dead end. Financial crime experts have a name for the process of creating mazes of bank accounts and offshore companies to move and hide money: layering. When the layers are laid down skillfully, it's often impossible for authorities to detect flows of illicit cash. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime estimates that as little as 1/5 of 1% of money that's laundered around the world is identified and intercepted. In the case of Taiwan's former first couple, though, an amateurish blunder in the laundering process, having the corporate executive store the cash in his basement, may have helped unravel the scheme. The executive later provided evidence against the ex-president and first lady, who were eventually sentenced to lengthy prison terms on an array of corruption charges. Court records indicate that Seuss, the wealth advisor, also betrayed the presidential family's secrets, acknowledging that the first couple's son and daughter-in-law had asked him to help them buy real estate in New York and Virginia but conceal their ownership of the properties. Despite evidence marshaled by authorities in Taiwan and the US, American prosecutors had to battle for nearly 2.5 years to seize the Chelsea condo as the proceeds of foreign corruption. An attorney representing the first couple's son denied the family had done anything wrong and charged that the U.S. Justice Department's forfeiture action was an effort to curry favor with the current government of Taiwan. In April 2013, the condo was auctioned for $1.5 million. As part of a settlement of the litigation, $225,000 of that went to the offshore company that controls West 28th Street LLC. The rest sits in the U.S. Treasury, apparently waiting for a decision on Taiwan's request that the U.S. share a portion of its stake from the sale. Ramaswamy, the Justice Department official, says seizing real estate under such circumstances is often difficult. Authorities can't just show that the owner of the property is corrupt. You have to prove the nexus between the corruption and the property itself, he said. Sometimes judges are skeptical, why are we going after some foreign guy who did something in a foreign country? Other than the occasional after-the-fact legal action, often sparked by investigations in other countries, U.S. authorities don't put up many roadblocks for foreigners who want to launder money through American real estate. Escrow and real estate agents aren't required to find out the real identities of property buyers and, unlike bankers, stockbrokers and other financial middlemen, they aren't required to report suspicious transactions to law enforcement. The Patriot Act, passed after the 9/11 attacks, requires that banks, securities houses and other financial firms follow stringent anti-money laundering rules. Real estate and escrow agents were included on the list, but a loophole in the law gave an opening for the U.S. Treasury to temporarily exempt the real estate industry from these requirements. A dozen years later, the exemption still stands. Investigations led by U.S. Senator Carl Levin, a Michigan Democrat, have highlighted the role of real estate agents in helping corrupt foreign officials and their families move looted cash into the U.S. Levin has called for Treasury to revoke the Patriot Act exemptions so that real estate and escrow agents will have to know their customers, evaluate the source of their funds, and turn away suspect clients. Louise I. Shelley, director of the Terrorism, Transnational Crime and Corruption Center at Virginia's George Mason University, believes that money laundering into real estate has increased since 9/11 as scrutiny of other kinds of transactions has increased. The use of real estate as a haven for dirty money, she says, is terribly overlooked by researchers, politicians and regulators. I've even written people in Treasury who have asked me about this, and they haven't gotten back to me, Shelley says. It's a big hole.